You are now entering Clearview, Illinois. The name of this tale is Peep Show. For us to start off on the right foot, I have to come clean. I watched the baker's house. Okay, I really watched their house from the bushes at night. As hard as that was to confess, it's even harder to repeat what I saw happening in their house. I was watching Ava's window with my binoculars from across the street in the Osterman's bushes. But have you seen her? Can you blame me? Well, one night I'm watching and her brother Yuri comes in as she happened to be undressing. And of course you'd assume it would be the awkward conversation followed by a prompt departure from the room. Yeah, you'd think that. What actually happened was pretty pornographic. They're related too, not stepbrother and sister. I mean full blood related. So yeah, what I did was fucked up, I'll grant you. But what they did took what I did and raised it. I mulled over this information for a while and wondered if I should do anything about it. I mean, it wasn't as if I had the moral high ground on this. So I sat on this information and have been sitting on this information for a little while. It's been burning a hole in my brain. So Ava was a little gross. I sorta understand that, but I kept watching, for scientific purposes really. The brother Yuri was stopping by her room on a semi-regular basis, and while I wasn't okay with it in the least, I kept watching. On one hot Saturday night, this case went from creepy to holy shit. Ava's father, Mr. Baker, came into her room, and before you know it, they're going at it. So now I went from mildly freaked out to just plain old horrified. Was Ava like brainwashed or something? I talked to her at school all the time, and aside from being super hot, she didn't come off as any different from any other girl. She wasn't sad or weird or angry, but I had to think, if this was happening to her all the time, maybe she was just dead inside or something. I felt sad for Miss Baker, knowing that she would one day find out about all this when Ava had a therapy session 20 years from now and unlocked a repressed memory. So my loose investigation of the Bakers continued. I cut the grass for most of the people in the neighborhood, the Bakers being one of them. So while I wasn't in their inner circle, I wasn't so removed that I couldn't attempt to be. I struck up a conversation with Yuri at school. I knew him even less than Ava, or their parents. He was moderately skilled in baseball, not AAA material, but good enough not to bobble the ball. From him, I realized that the Bakers were super religious. He even mentioned God a few times when we were shooting the shit. Some of it began to make a little more sense to me. They were all to themselves. They hadn't been in Clearview but 4 or 5 years, and they moved around a lot. Maybe they were just so to themselves they didn't have anyone else? Nah, that didn't make sense to me either, because as weird as they were behind closed doors, they were completely normal outside of it. Yuri wasn't an ugly or awkward guy. He could get ass other than his sister if he wanted. So after a few days of talking with Yuri, I got invited to his house. I didn't actually know if I truly wanted to go. In the back of my mind, the what if part of my brain was like, let them keep fucking each other, it's none of your business. Now I was fully invested in just how fucked up it was, and a part of me was pining for an explanation, if not a conclusion. Me and Yuri played some MLB The Show on PlayStation, and his mom, who was smoking hot, brought us Rice Krispie treats. I didn't quite know where to go with this now that I was here. Should I tell the mom? Should I snoop around for the smoking gun? Like a video clearly labeled, me fucking my kids, or was I just gonna snitch and hope for the best? I slipped away to the bathroom and I scoured the cabinets, finding absolutely nothing, though I wasn't exactly sure what I would find. I saw Ava laying down on her bed, texting probably, and even knowing what I knew, I was still into her. I couldn't push up on her now though, seeing something in her was so broken that even she couldn't see it. She greeted me as I passed. I'm guessing she sensed me lingering like a creeper, but it wasn't as if I could help it. She brought it out of me. I spoke and we talked for a few moments. The only thing odd about her was how willing she was to talk to me, but then again, being all religious, maybe she was just being nice to butter me up for her cult. Mr. Baker got home and we had dinner, said grace, and everyone talked about their day. It was downright boring how normal they were. While we were eating, there was a crash in the basement. Mr. Baker went on about a bookshelf that he hadn't hung right, but maybe that's where they kept all their victims. Maybe the whole family was in on it. I offered to go down and help, but predictably he didn't want my help. If there was nothing down there, that was the end of it as far as I was concerned. Just accusing them of being freaks wasn't enough without some sort of evidence. My last ditch might be to get one of those long-distance cameras and record them as best as I could. So before I left, when Mr. and Mrs. Baker were upstairs and just me and Yuri were playing MLB, I took another bathroom break, except this time I slipped into the basement. That place was junky and littered with furniture and items that had no place upstairs. The steps creaked loudly as I descended, so much so I got scared I was busted. I scanned the unfinished room and pulled the string on a singular swinging light. When the light drove the dark away, I put eyes on a workbench, and like Mr. Baker said, there was an oddly askew shelf and a box of nails on the cement floor. I didn't see much in the way of trapdoors or secret crawl spaces, but with the sheer amount of junk down here, I never had found it in the short time I had. I crept back up the stairs and nearly jumped out of my skin when I saw Mrs. Baker there in the kitchen. "Hey," I said, and she smiled with a slightly more sly look than she had before. Before I could say a thing, she slammed me onto the refrigerator. My first thought was she caught me snooping and wanted answers. That was until she slipped me the tongue. I'm 17, it's not as if I had any defense against that. I made a token attempt to push her off of me, but the harder I got, the weaker I got. I think I said something about her husband being upstairs and Yuri in the next room, but in 20 seconds time, I could have given a shit if Jesus and all his merry men were watching. Through some miracle, nobody walked in on us waxing the kitchen floor, and from there, just like that, my investigation was done. I didn't have even the little moral high ground I had as a window peeper anymore. After that incident, I couldn't look Yuri or Ava in the eye anymore, so I stopped hanging out with them on any level. The only thing I did in fact do was cut their grass. A few weeks later into the season, when things got darker a bit earlier, and it had been raining much of the week, I decided I couldn't put off the baker's lawn forever. I always cut their grass last, even though they were in the middle of the block. I hustled to trim the grass, but the weather being as fickle as it was, it started really pouring when I was halfway through the backyard. I ran and took shelter in Mrs. Baker's greenhouse, lawnmower and all. I watched the rain pour down in buckets, but soon grew tired of waiting for it to slack up. I casually glanced at the unusual overgrowth in the greenhouse, but I paid it little mind, seeing I didn't know the first thing about plants. What I did know, however, was peeping through windows, and as much as I didn't like to admit it, I liked doing it. I did make a true effort to stay away from the Bakers. Their brand of crazy was far beyond my type of crazy. Though it was raining, I could see the lights turn on in Mrs. Baker's room. It was hard to make out in the pouring rain, but my perv senses were tingling, and I think she may have been undressing. I took out my phone and attempted to see if it could help me clear up the picture. I heard a gentle rustle coming from behind me. I turned my gaze to the massive wall of foliage, figuring some critter had the same idea as me and took shelter back here. I crept forward to the wall of green, and droplets of rain trickled in from a leak in the roof, jostling the leaves on the alien-looking plant. I turned my back to the house, and almost the moment I rose my phone, the Bakers rushed the backyard. They didn't just run out of the house as if reacting to some odd sound. They all moved as one, as if they simultaneously had a switch flip. Ava, Mr. Baker, and Yuri rushed out of the back door, making no attempts to shield themselves from the elements. Ava didn't even have on shoes. At the same moment, Mrs. Baker leapt out of the second-floor window wearing no clothes at all. She landed without even breaking stride. With dead and empty expressions, they advanced on the greenhouse. I pushed the lawnmower in front of the door and latched the tiny little hook that was more to prevent it from having the wind blow it open than to keep people out. The Bakers with emotionless faces pulled at the door violently. I turned to see if there was a way to slip out the back. When I did, I was face to face with stalk-like tendrils of green surging at me. The overgrowth was alive. I backed away, dodging the whipping vines. The door busted open. When I was half turned, one of the several green limbs lassoed my legs and dragged me towards it. Within seconds, rope vines wrapped over vine until I was held prisoner on the back wall. The Bakers looked at me without malice or judgment. Mrs. Baker stepped forward as if psychically selected to be the family's advocate. She approached me wordlessly and nude as the day she was born, wet from the rain. She emotionlessly stared at me for half a second, as if considering her next move, and the move she made came as an utter surprise to me. She kissed me. I attempted to resist at first, but in seconds I let go and opened my mouth. I felt my throat filling with green bile, and I knew peace. My relationship with the Bakers is better than ever now. I visit them almost every day. I have to admit, I never knew love like this, and now that I do, I will never go back. You are now exiting Clearview, Illinois. Hope you enjoyed the trip.